Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Sit back and listen to interviews, discussion about books, and anything else literary. There's always something or someone new on the show. Good evening, listeners. I'm Amy, and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Today we are joined by an author. Please introduce yourself and let the audience know how they can connect with you.
I am Judge Michael Randazzo. You can find me on social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at Randazzo Law. Last name Randazzo. And I have served as a judge in the 42nd Judicial Circuit of Missouri for the last 5 years. I was a municipal judge before that, so in total I've been a judge for about 10 years. And just recently I became an author.
So what made you take that extra step? What made you decide, I should write about this?
So sort of this precipitating event, large portions of this book are written about my grandfather, and he was my hero, but he was a very flawed man.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of character flaws, lots of things that he did in his life that I don't think he was proud of, that I also, was not necessarily proud of. But he died, and I took that really hard. I was missing something in my life, and I wanted to make sure that stories that he told, things that I knew about him, weren't just lost when he died. And so I started just writing them down. I wrote them down in sort of this Word file, and I thought someday I'm gonna send this file to my kids so that they know, all the good, the bad, everything about Grandpa. Well, that writing started becoming therapeutic to me, and so I started telling these stories, and I found myself laughing and and crying many times about what had happened or about my memories. And I thought that maybe there was something more than just some Word file here. And so I just kept adding and adding and adding. And at some point it got sort of to this length that it was no longer just this file on my desktop or my laptop, but it was a project, and it was something more. And I started thinking about ways that I'd want to present that to, my children, but if maybe there were some lessons in there that people could learn, and there was things about my own self that people could learn that, that they didn't know. And so I started polishing it up and, reformed it a little bit and sent it to an open call for true crime writings, and got a phone call from the CEO of Wild Brew Press literally the next day, the only place I submitted it, and said, we're going to publish this. And then so we started a really extensive editing process.
Yeah. I completely understand that. But that's wonderful. I always do my best to review any books that come from that publishing company, especially the true crimes. And I just recently started adding I reformatted my podcast to do author interviews and anyone else that's written something or worked in the literary field. But I like that you said that when you're writing, it was kind of like cathartic for you. And I can relate to that. I've been writing since I could actually write, and always telling stories and things like that. And recently I switched genres to nonfiction, local history, and I'm just loving it. So when you were putting it together, did you have to, I don't know, I know, about your grandfather and yourself, but did you have to do, any research, dig up things, old photos or something like that, to, refresh your memory about things about your grandfather?
Yes, so I did a whole lot of research. I've been always sort of inquisitive by nature. I didn't ever really take things at face value, and that caused me to sometimes get myself into trouble or go down rabbit holes that I probably shouldn't have went down.
Right.
That was sort of the experience in writing this book. I didn't want to write anything that I didn't have some way to support. So either firsthand, a story that was told directly from someone involved, or some primary source out there that I could get to, a newspaper article, court documents, something that showed there was some evidence to support the story that I had been told. And in doing that, it actually provided me some clarity on some situations where there was not clarity, but it also, frankly, it gave me a different understanding of who my family members were. What I mean by that is, there was a story in my family all the time that my great grandfather, his name was Joseph Randazzo. He came over to the United States from Italy. He was born on the ship, and so he was an Italian citizen because he had left an Italian port and was born en route to the United States.
Wow.
So he comes to the United States, and he and his mother, his father, who I'm not sure who it even is today, and I talk a little bit in the book about sort of speculation about that, but his father remains in Italy, and he never has contact with his father ever in his entire life. He comes through Chicago to St. Louis, or the St. Louis area, and he ends up getting involved in organized crime in St. Louis. Now, the family story was always that Grandpa Joe went to prison, and Grandpa Joe went to prison for stealing a load of apples.
Okay.
And that story just didn't seem right on the face to me. I knew a little bit, even when I was younger, about sort of crime and punishment, and the severity of the crime didn't match the punishment. And so I was always skeptical of that story. I became an adult, and really in researching for this book even, found some newspaper articles where my grandfather did steal some apples. I found some newspaper clippings that says that he stole a load of apples and that he received a fine for that. He had to pay some money for stealing those apples. Didn't go to prison for that, but he did go to prison for being a heroin trafficker.
Oh.
And so he was involved in the local La Cosa Nostra, the Italian mafia is what most people know it as.
Right.
But went to prison because he was trafficking for them.
Wow. That's a lot different than stealing a few apples.
Big difference.
Wow, that is. And one thing, especially when you're researching family history, you find things and that you might think and like, oh, I wish I didn't see that, or I wish I didn't know that. I've been also working on my own family history. My grandmother passed a couple years ago, and she was my best friend. She died at 101, and I've been writing down her stories. My cousin had my second cousin, actually, her nephew interviewed her a few years before she passed away, because he's a historian and he likes family history as well, and he gave me copies of all the recordings. But then now, I go through stuff of my dad's. My dad's in a facility because he's end stage dementia. But I've gone through I'm like, I have to take care of everything. So I went through papers and read stuff that he wrote, and then I'm like, oh, I just really wish I didn't know that.
So I had another one of those experiences actually in writing the book. I have a grandfather on my grandmother's side. So the one I just previously spoke about, that was my great grandfather on my grandfather, Nick Randazzo's side. So my paternal side.
Mm-hmm.
On my great grandmother, or my great grandfather on my grandmother's side, he was a kind man. I only knew him as that his entire life. Was a sweet, caring, just loving guy. Never did anything untoward or anything that I would suspect was inappropriate towards anyone, frankly. Never heard him say a cross word, never seen him do anything that I would think would lead me to believe that he was anything but just a very, stereotypical grandfather.
Right.
And at some point, we got told that Grandpa had to go to a nursing home. And so, again, didn't really pass the smell test for me at the time, but I thought I was being told the truth, that he had advanced in some, disease.
Right.
I assumed it was dementia, and that he couldn't take care of himself anymore, so he was going to go live in a nursing home. And I never got to see Grandpa again. And the older I got, the more I sort of became inquisitive about that situation. And I found out later that my grandfather did not end up in a nursing home. He actually went to prison, and he went to prison for child molestation.
Oh, my word.
specifically statutory sodomy in the second degree. And that in Missouri just means he inappropriately touched a child that was under 12 years old.
Yeah, yeah, I'm familiar with that law. But yeah, oh my goodness.
And so like these things that you sort of, you form the basis or the foundation of kind of who you are in my life, the rug was always getting swept out from underneath me. Who these people were and, how that they lived their lives in my brain existed one way, but in reality it existed another way.
Yeah, and I can see that, some people we just love, and we think of them, especially if I'm going to age myself, but if there are elders, we are raised to show them respect, and we do that whether we like them or not, but we love them. And sometimes they're just we see them a certain way, especially when we're younger. We see things differently, like about our parents and grandparents, than when we are actual adults, And it wasn't until my children became adults and I was a parent to adult children where I had to, like, take a step back and say, okay, how do I'm still their mom, but I don't have to, I don't have to tell them what to do. I always tell them to be safe and all that stuff. And when we see eye to eye to one of our family members finally, it's still, we kind of see them as we've always seen them, unless secrets spilled out and now we don't know what to do with our feelings for them.
And very much in what you're describing is the reality of this book. I don't want my children to think that the people that they loved were perfect. I want them to know about those flaws, and I want them to know of some of the family secrets, because in my experience, I'm a circuit judge, and I get to deal with a lot of heavy stuff on a regular basis. I deal with felony cases that are the worst of the worst. Anybody that's charged with a felony in one of my counties, I get the case. And so everything from relatively low-level felonies in our state all the way to capital murder cases. So when people are facing the death penalty and everything in between. And so I've got to see in practice the problems associated with keeping secrets.
Yeah.
And it just always seems like family secrets come back to haunt people, but also they lead to some really bad things happening to other people. Had people disclosed or told the things that they knew when they were younger or before, they may have prevented some victimization or some bad things from happening to other people. And very much, in line with those beliefs, this book's about that, but this book's also about sort of separating this next generation from the sins of our predecessors.
And that's a really good concept, because the truth is that, sometimes people are judged based off of the actions of others, especially a family member or, a spouse or something like that. A child grows up to be a serial killer and they're blaming the parents. Or, a child was raised by a serial killer but didn't know it. I've read those stories as well. And I must say that I really, I'm honored to have you on my show as not just an author, but someone, a judge, and doing the things that you do. And I can't even imagine some of the horrible things that you've had to sit through, and how do you deal with that when it's done? I mean, how do you do that? Do you compartmentalize, or, is there something that you do to get that whatever case out of your head, because now it's over and whatever happened?
So I want to say that I have a great answer for you, but I don't. In reality, those bad cases, they stick with you. I replay pictures, videos, things that have happened to people in my mind frequently. And so part of the way that I deal with it is figuring out things that are outside of that realm, outside of the courtroom, that I don't want to use the word distract because it doesn't distract me, but it uses my time in a way that doesn't require me to do that level of thinking. One of the things that I've always done, I've always been really involved in sports myself and with my children. And I still even coach softball today, one of my daughter's teams. And that the ball field for me is just kind of that escape. I don't have to be anything more. I don't have to be this, this guy in the robe who's making these really tough calls.
Right.
I get to be that 8-year-old that gets to go back out and just live carefree on the ball field for, an hour and a half or 2 hours while a ball game's going on.
Yeah.
And that's helpful. I will tell you that a lot of people in my field have addiction issues. That's always been something I've been very aware of. There's addiction that runs prevalent throughout my family. And I've always been very aware of my predisposition, I would say, to be addicted to substances.
Mm-hmm.
And intentionally, I've stayed away from substances. Now, I drink coffee and lots of caffeine, but really addictive substances that are very harmful for you. I've always been aware that there's very bad things associated with those. And that's not a way to distract you from the realities of whatever your life is. And so one of the ways that I really sort of just compartmentalize is I spend as much time with my family as I can. And I just try to be thankful for every minute I get to spend with them because I get to see lots of broken families in my life.
Yeah.
And another thing I do is sort of, it's helped me understand that everyone has flaws, and the flaws that we think exist in people around us probably aren't as bad as some of the flaws that I get to deal with every day in my day job.
Right.
And it kind of, it gives you a little perspective. Like people are flawed. We're all human and we make mistakes, and including myself, I make mistakes frequently. I know people want to think that judges are infallible and that they are above making mistakes, but that's just not the case. We have erasers on pencils because, we make mistakes, but we also have courts of appeals in our court system because judges make mistakes. If we didn't make mistakes as judges, we wouldn't have a court of appeals.
Right. Yeah. No, you're correct. And if we were all perfect, it would be very boring.
And I agree. And there's lots of things about my family that are discussed in the book. And I don't try to glorify any of those things. That's not at all what this book is about. There's always been some mystique associated with, kind of the mafia and the Godfather, kind of Scarface, those type of organized crime and those type of things.
Right.
And this book is not at all about glorifying those things. It's kind of bringing those things to light so that we can talk about them and in a real way confess those sins and try to move on, try to sort of get some atonement for things that I never had control over. There were lots of things in my life that were inhibited by the deviance of sort of my last name, the things I inherited.
Right.
And in my life, in a very real way, I started to recognize those own patterns that I was falling into. And those patterns could have been, my downfall.
Right.
I talk about in the book some of my proclivity to get into fights, to be violent. And that's an inherited trait from the men in my family.
Yeah.
And once I recognized that was happening, first was recognizing it and understanding like this is something that happens to all of the men in your family. How do you overcome that?
Right.
And then, how do not just do I overcome that, but how do I explain to my kids, like these things existed in everyone before you. They may show themselves out in you. And when they do, you need to recognize them and be prepared for them so that they don't inhibit your future or keep you from being the person that you should be. And then, how do I give my kids the opportunity to succeed and fail on their own merits? Because that's the number one thing I'd like to accomplish with this book. Like, let them be their own people.
Right.
And if they succeed on their own merits, wonderful. And if they fail on their own merits, that's wonderful. But don't let outside influences affect who they end up being as people.
That's true. And sometimes, you have failure is like one of the best things that could happen to you because you learn from it. If you were always successful, you wouldn't, you would be a different person. You think you could do whatever you wanted, but I think it is our failures that we learn from. And I understand about the violence of the men. When my sons, they're in their late 20s, early 30s now. My husband at the time, 20 years ago, he tried to kill me, and after he went to prison, I was raising our three boys, and one was special needs, and I had to do it, but I was always afraid that, there was that piece of their father in them, but they turned out, they could have used that as an excuse like people do. Oh, I had a bad childhood, so I can go around and beat people up and kill them and all that stuff. But they were just the total opposites. It's like that piece of their father is not even there inside them.
And I can deeply appreciate that. I tell some stories in the book about the deviance of my father and his dad too, but also some victimization. And there's stories about victimization and the women in my family, the way that they were victimized. My grandmother, she was a victim of domestic abuse, and it happened for quite some time. And how do we separate ourselves from that? She eventually was able to remove herself from that, but knowing all of these things happened in, sort of this close familial history.
Right.
I want to be transparent about those things. Like, I don't want this to be some secret that those things existed in the past, because if we know those things exist, we can prepare for them. And that, when I was talking about the violence, no one told me like, hey, your family has this proclivity to just go out and commit violence. What I recognized though was that I had heard stories about things that had happened before, and I was watching those play out sort of in my life in real time. And I knew that that was a very bad thing. And a young me, like 16-year-old me, knew that that was a very bad thing, and that was going to be my downfall if I didn't do something to address that. And that took work, because, I mean, I will tell you, just even men in my family today, my dad's almost 60 years old. If someone challenges him, there will be a fist fight. It's just, that is who he is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way that we were socialized. It's not just that I believe that it's genetic, that there's just I was socialized that way. We don't let people, sort of wrong us. And when they do, you handle your business. And if someone does something wrong to you, you handle it with your fists. And that's the way that you settle disputes. When I realized, really, to be honest, when I had my first child, I realized that couldn't happen anymore. That I was to be that child's protector, but I was not to be that inhibitor. I was not to stop that child from being whatever they were going to be in life. Right. And anything that I could shield them from, I had a duty to do that. And so I know people, it's cliche to say that, having a child is life changing. It truly, truly changed my life in a way that I can't fully describe, but it changed my perspective about every single thing that I did.
Oh yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And, kids are, they're resilient, and they see behavior from their parents or grandparents, and that, is something that I'm pretty polite. I really try to avoid conflict, but it always seems to follow me somewhere. But my kids, they see how I was. Like, I try to be kind. I don't judge people. I only judge people based off of how they treat me and how they treat others. And But if somebody hurts my kids, even now, like, I mean, I'm disabled because of the brain injury my husband gave me. But, and as I get older, things progress and get worse. But I remember being a teenager, and my father was very abusive. He had a TBI from a childhood accident, and he didn't realize that was why he was angry all the time. And it wasn't until, I mean, he used to hit my mother and throw things at her, and but then as soon as his I don't know what happened, but my father finally figured out what was wrong with him. My mother was sick, and then somehow my grandmother, my dad's mother, found out that, my dad had hit my mom, and she never knew about it. So she drove up to the house, and she beeped her horn and made him come out, and she gave him a lecture he would never forget. After that, he stopped hitting my mother. And I just thought, oh, I wish that she knew years ago. But I remember being myself was like one time I was so mad as a kid, and I picked something up and was going to throw it across the room, and and I stopped. I'm like, I do not want to be my dad. So, and that was just something that I had to deal with. We didn't get along. I just didn't like the way he treated my mother, and he kind of ignored me. And for a while I wanted his attention, but as an adult, after everything that had happened to me and I moved back to my hometown, we got close as adults. He was definitely, a changed person, especially after my mom passed away. But I can understand, we see our parents, our grandparents act a certain way. I learned from my mother to be kind, not because she told me to, but because that's how she was. No matter what was thrown up against her, literally, she was always kind.
So we have sort of a common theme here. We had, men who are certainly extremely flawed, and the same experience that you had with your dad, sort of wanting the attention, wanting to at least be centered in their life, and then as an adult having a different type of relationship with them, and sort of, I guess, accepting the flaws and figuring out how to have that relationship and love them despite those flaws. That's something that I experienced and I wrote about in the book very thoroughly, I think. But also with a mother that it sounds like was put through the ringer. And, my mom, she's a saint. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. She certainly has her flaws too, but she's been through more than I could ever imagine. And the only thing that she consistently had to give in her life was love.
Yeah.
And she somehow, in the depths of her soul that I can't even really fathom, was able to love me in a way that I had to have, or I would not have turned out the way that I did. I've turned out pretty all right for the circumstances I've been through. And had it not been for the love and support that she relentlessly provided me, there is zero chance that happens.
Did you have siblings?
I did. So I have a brother who is about 3.5 years younger than me, and he experienced sort of similar things, and he's turned out very well. I have a much younger brother whose circumstances I write about in the book as well. Not a child of my mother's, but a child of my father's.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom kind of accepted him in at some point as one of her own as well. And I have a good relationship with him too. But my brother Kevin, who is close in age to me, we had very similar experiences, and we've turned out both very well for the circumstances that we went through.
And I think that, it's not just part of your character, but I'm sure that just having your mother be who she was, and be there for you, that helped. You had someone even though they may have been going through hell or something, they still could put that smile on the face. They had love in their heart. They didn't let it go cold because of, circumstances against them. And it's a lot for a lot of people. And hopefully, just talking about this, I'm sure, yeah, I didn't realize we had so much in common, but I'm sure there are people that might be listening and understand that too. And definitely, will read your book. I have it on my list to read, but um, I'm just really, honored to be able to talk to you about these things. And now that I do that, when I read your book, I will feel like it's more personal to me because you've shared so much about that book. So I am very anxious to read it. And of course, I will write a review, and and you'll get a notification when my review's been posted. But
Well, and I completely appreciate that, but just sort of this outlet and us, I think this is the way through as a society. Judges many times are viewed as sort of robotic. We have this stereotypical picture of what a judge is, and it's usually just this old person, usually in most people's minds, an older white man who is barely breathing, much less paying attention and doing the job that they've been elected or appointed to do.
right.
Um, and that's not the case for me. I'm 41 years old, and in judicial terms, I am an infant. I am very young, but I'm young enough to understand that we have to change the perception of the judiciary. It it's really in vogue right now to criticize what judges do, and maybe rightfully so for some of them. But I think the way that we get through it, judges can't just put out sort of statements that are political statements or um, to sort of press releases to refute the things that have happened. Judges have ethical standards that they have to follow, and they can't really comment upon cases in that way. But
Oh,
what we can do is we can be transparent with people, and we need people to understand that judges are human. We are people, and that we have backgrounds as well, and those backgrounds give us sometimes very unique perspective. My background, I think, uniquely equipped me to become the circuit judge and me doing, what I'm doing today. And I love doing it. And kind of to circle back to what we were talking about earlier about compartmentalizing and setting cases aside. My judicial approach is one that it's never failed me, but the way that I approach cases is, am I comfortable if this person were released from my courtroom? Am I comfortable with that person being around my children? And if I am, then they probably should be released. And if I'm not, they need to be institutionalized, incarcerated. And it's yet to fail me because I use that perspective. And if I'm keeping, in a way, attempting to keep my own children safe, I'm also keeping all of the public safe and those children
right.
safe that are not my children.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, what you do is it's just a wonderful thing. And you're right. People judge, uh, pardon the pun, but, people, they see one act, maybe somebody in an occupation, maybe a judge or a lawyer or, a police officer, something like that. And one person does something wrong and then they think, oh, well, if that judge did something wrong, all of them did, or that police officer did something wrong, then, people assume that, okay, that one is also the many, and that's not the way it is. Each person, no matter their occupation or what what they do and how they do their best to protect society is something that it's an individual act, even though they're part of something greater.
Absolutely. And really the book is, the theme of the book is all about that. It's recognizing labels and removing those labels as best as we can.
Yeah, it's definitely, uh, And I hope that more people actually do that, because sometimes it seems like we're going backwards in society, and when we should be just going forward. And some of the old stigmas seem to be coming back. And I, for one, I am so tired of everything that's going on in the world, full of hate, and where I just want people to take a step back and think about their behavior. Be kind. I mean, I've literally started this Be Kind campaign, and just to get, people thinking. And in this world, I'm more surprised when someone is nice to me than if somebody is mean to me. And that shouldn't be that way.
No, that's absolutely the incorrect way we should be doing things. And I love the be kind, and I say that frequently.
Me too.
There is, even in practice, in the practice of law, which is supposed to be sort of this honorable profession, lawyers that come in front of me are many times mean to each other, and there's no reason to do it. We're professionals acting in a professional capacity, and they will take personal shots at each other in the courtroom. And it does nothing to advance the case. It's in no one's interest to do that, but just because they felt like, well, I got my barb in. And we don't have to be that. If you want to change somebody's perception, you have to show them. You don't tell them. And I use that in many times with people that are in my court. If you want me to believe you, show me through your actions. Don't tell me, because
Exactly.
I get lip service all the time. I get told things all the time that are just not true.
Right.
Show me.
Exactly. I want to thank you very much for being on my show. And like I said, I can't wait for your book to come out. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And hopefully, someone listening will, even if it's just one person, look at themselves and, think, how am I contributing to moving forward rather than taking a step backwards and holding on to hate?
Absolutely. And we change the world one person at a time. And if it just reaches one person, we've done something. We've affected change somehow. So thank you so much for the outlet.
You're welcome. So I'm just going to close up here. If you wish for you or your book to be on the show, go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast. Thank you for listening. Be safe, be well, and always be kind. Tune in here again next week for another tantalizing discussion. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast.